Hey y'all, Daniel from Iron Man here, and I'm extremely grateful that you're watching our videos once again. We're working on getting back our Instagram accounts. They got banned again, but nonetheless, super grateful to be back here. And we're steering away from the peptides today and actually talking about hormone optimization. In this instance, we're talking about the most direct male hormone optimization therapy, testosterone replacement therapy. Now, I've seen a lot of individuals who come to our clinic, and we typically do the same protocol of 3 times weekly of the injection frequency. And the reason why I start the conversation like that is I believe most clinics are prescribing this absolutely wrong. So let's actually dive into what the literature actually shows about injection frequency because whether the formulation is cypionate or an anthate, it's not super relevant. I mean, the most commonly prescribed injectable esters, they both have the same half-life, although it's debated online. It's roughly a week, 7, 8 days. What that means is that, excuse me, that's how long that the drug is active in the system until your body clears it up. So why is injection frequency actually the biggest indicator whether a protocol is good? Well, let's pull up this right here and I will show you basically the actual serum level fluctuation on the same weekly total dose. So all of this is basically the same dose, just different injection frequency schedule. So let's actually zoom in here. Or no, I guess that won't work. But if we're gonna look at these lines, and bear with me, I am pretty colorblind, so I'll have to zoom in here. But this is the actual serum fluctuation for the relative serum testosterone level on the y-axis, and the duration is for around 2 weeks. So if we go to the weekly single dose right here, look how much that fluctuates the serum concentration. And what that means at a base level is say you are a natural person, not on any hormone optimization therapies. Your testosterone is never going to do this pattern ever in your life. If anything, it just does kind of this. Little fluctuations throughout the day, but there's no aggressive peak and trough like this. So, what this is indicating, and this is a very traditional standard, most clinics do 200 milligrams once or even once, or excuse me, once weekly or once bi-weekly. So depending on the protocol, it could be 200 milligrams a week, dosed once weekly, or 100 milligrams a week, dosed bi-weekly, which is insanity to me. So we can see based on the injection on day 0, starts high around 1 for the relative serum level of testosterone. Then the nanograms per deciliter is irrelevant here. This is just the actual serum concentration. It goes down around week 7, the half-life, injects again, and it almost goes up by, excuse me, 50%, and then troughs down almost to the same level that you started at. So you are getting that serum level, the highest serum level out of all of them, which makes sense. You're injecting 200 milligrams of testosterone in one injection. That's insanity. You should never do that, in my opinion. I'm not giving medical advice, but just looking at the literature itself, look how inconsistent the serum concentration is. Now, if we look at the twice weekly, the split dose, I still don't think this is optimal. Um, this is basically a little improvement. So we have 3 troughs, right? So we have the first injection, second injection, and then I'm not sure why it shows 3, but it is almost similar as the peaks and troughs, right? Ideally, you'd want to do 3 injections a week. I believe that's what works best for most people, just keeping that serum concentration consistent. So you still have those troughs right here and peaks. But the daily microdose, it's actually pretty well supported in the literature that it has the flattest hormone curve of the 3 approaches that we are shown right here. And the practical burden really is just injection frequency and injection fatigue. So if you can get over your fear of needles, whether it's sub-Q or IM, I think that if you want the most stable serum concentration levels and lowering the possibility for side effects, androgenic effects such as androgenic alopecia, male pattern baldness, or oily skin, acne, breast tenderness, You want the serum concentration to mimic a natural's production, which it will never do that because you're endogenously injecting a consistent amount of testosterone, but you want it to mimic a pulsatile manner that a natural would otherwise produce naturally. So the FDA actually approved sub-Q testosterone enanthate injectors in 2018, and the reason I giggled a little bit is because of the memes we see of the hormone transitions from female to male. They actually use this formula quite often. It's actually the number one formula that is prescribed to hormone replacement therapies for transgender individuals. But in 2021, a study of 110 hypogonadal men using it found consistent effective trough testosterone levels at 6 weeks post-initiation with hematocrit PSA monitored alongside. Comparative literature broadly finds that sub-Q and IM produce similar overall efficacy. So there's really no difference in terms of the administration with side effects, but there is practical explanation, excuse me, there is anecdotal reports that if you do inject sub-Q, since it is in the fat tissue, it dissolves much slower rather than IM. It's a direct injection, so that could be speculated. There hasn't been any literature published there since it is relatively new and no controlled studies are on that. It's just kind of more anecdotal than anything. But this is just more for people who don't really want to take the risk for IM. You do have to rotate injection sites. There is a lot of more error for injection accidents, I would say. So that's just something I wanted to bring up as well. Oh, hold on. Sorry. My goodness. Hold on. Bear with me. Okay. So what does the actual Endocrine Society guidelines say? This is basically the FDA of hormone replacement therapy, basically literature. And basically, Ben said basically twice, in TRT management is the Endocrine Society's practice guidelines. This is basically where a lot of clinics base their protocols on. It defines diagnostic criteria and monitoring targets with specific regimens kind of left to the judgment of the clinics themselves. But basically, what a safe range therapeutic, and whenever you see excuse me, hear someone say TRT and they mention anything above 150 milligrams of testosterone a week, that is a low dose cycle, in my opinion. We could have a conversation in the comments on what that actually indicates, but in my opinion, it's no longer therapeutic at that dose. For some individuals, it may be, but for the broad public to get a stable hormone replacement therapy, I would say 85% of people do not need more than 160, let's call it. So we want to keep the hematocrit under 54% for stroke, other sort of blood clotting indications there. And the actual healthy total test levels is 350 to 750. And we can unpack that, why that's relevant. But standard monitoring includes just regular blood panels, hematocrit, PSA, and it's becoming more standardized to see ALT, AST, which is absolutely mandatory in my opinion, as well as CRP or any sort of lipid changes. I think those should be standard in any sort of TRT protocol. But the single most important study in the entire TRT literature, and it answers the question that drove FDA warning labels for nearly a decade, which is kind of where we got the scare of cardiovascular risk with TRT. In 2015, the FDA required test manufacturers to run a large dedicated cardiovascular safety trial. And this was around a large sample size of 5,246 men, 45 to 80, with existing cardiovascular disease or high cardiovascular risk. So this randomized to daily transdermal testosterone gel or placebo. This is for 33 months. So these people are already at cardiovascular risk, but on the y-axis, we see the experiencing primary MACE endpoint, and then we have the actual group. So we have the placebo and the testosterone. So the testosterone was actually non-inferior for placebo or to placebo for major adverse cardiac events. So it actually showed that this is not an actual risk because the placebo risk actually went up unbelievably so. So I think it was more than anything. I don't want to say fear mongering, but a skepticism that was just not proven in literature. But now we look at the biologics of it. There's no risk, right? Well, let's use that term lightly. There's always risk with anything, excuse me. But in this instance, a placebo outperformed the actual compound in a controlled study. So worth noting. That's what kind of eliminated the fear of cardiovascular risk with testosterone. But the findings that complicate a simple, it's totally safe takeaways. Obviously, the more non-fatal arrhythmias, fibrillation, excuse me, and acute kidney injury occurred in the testosterone group that were not pre-specified endpoints and were not expected. So that was just more like for review than any sort of really heavy risk. But hematocrit above 54%. It was only on a small percent of the participants. And then testosterone reduced anemia significantly more than placebo. So a genuine benefit that's actually easy to overlook next to the cardiovascular headline. And then basically what this is saying is that the the main skepticisms of starting this kind of therapy are the hematocrit and the lipid changes, as well as by extension some cardiovascular problems. So with the blood thickness, there's more literature coming out that hematocrit necessarily isn't dangerous by itself, but combined with ApoB, with high lipids, what have you, triglycerides, then that could be a recipe for disaster. But in turn, if I want you to take away anything from this video, and by the way, I did not do my medical disclaimer. This is not medical advice. This is just unpacking literature for the public to be educated and knowledgeable about regenerative medicine. But what I want you to understand is that testosterone is a natural hormone. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, but testosterone cypionate, a lot of it's compounded from soy plants. So kind of ironic that you call someone a soy boy, but that's where your testosterone is coming from. But whatever. Injection frequency, you either want it to be more consistent than less. That is very important. And the reason for that is stable serum levels. And you want to have that healthy range of above 600, but below 1500 nanograms per deciliter, maybe even 1300 in that upper optimal range. But any questions, please comment. We could have an educated conversation in the comments as we're still unpacking new data now. And now younger guys are hopping on this kind of therapy, which I don't necessarily agree with if you haven't tried either an enclomiphene or an HCG, what have you, monotherapies themselves, because this is a lifelong commitment. There are some fertility risks indicated within starting this therapy, but let's stop that sharing there. Just wanted to hop on here and kind of share just the main thing with starting hormonal replacement therapy. Ensure that you're going to a clinic that administers or gives out plans that have higher injection frequency than lower. And make sure you actually need this thing because a lot of people, they're just prescribing this like candy, throwing an aromatase inhibitor on top of it and saying, have a day. No, that's not us in IronMendLLC.com. Check us out and support us on Instagram at IronMend, and we will see you all soon. Thanks for watching. Make it a great day. Stop.